Greetings, warlords. Rodge here. We're taking a look at the Grand Heathen army today. I was inspired to do this from the recent battle report videos where I've been showcasing the models at the start before the battle. And it was really hard not to add commentary, talk about the models, the manufacturer, the painting, the inspiration, stuff like that, and just say what it is and get on to the battle report. So this video will give me an opportunity to do all that, and I've tried a couple different methods for showcasing armies on YouTube here in the past. It was all kind of fizzled, so I'm just going to do it all in one big shot here. Throughout this video, we'll be looking at the individual models. Not all of them, but probably most of them. We'll start by taking a look at the V&V Miniatures Slavic Levy. No two models will have the exact same color scheme as we'll see, so I think each one deserves its own spot in the sun. And that was one of the goals with the army for sure, having unique individual models. I was coming off my second Saga Force, which was the last Romans at the time, and I used a uniform approach of blue and red on almost everything. And I wanted to really lean into the Dark Age aesthetic of having individual troops showing up in their own armor and their own clothes. Some of the other goals were using bright colors. So my first Saga army was the Men of Wessex, and they ended up very dark and muted, and I didn't want to repeat what I look back on as a mistake now. Another goal was to do unique trim and freehand on the clothing and shields. I'll talk more about that later. I wanted to use the airbrush more extensively than on other projects. And I'll talk more about that. And lastly, I wanted to use a ton of different manufacturers and brands with this project, as there's a lot of good manufacturers out there. And the last goal, the biggest goal, was to have a forever army that could cover a wide range of Saga battle boards, if not 100% historically accurate, at least cover it in spirit. So Vikings, Yams Vikings, Pagan Rus, using them for Norse Gales, Pagan peoples. I'm using them for Eastern princes now. So obviously there's a huge range of geography and time separating all of those. My background's always been fantasy, and so for this, it's the thought that counts, I like to think. So the project began in late 2019. Made a big purchase order from V&V Miniatures, Brother Vinny's Beast, and assembled most of the troops here in one big batch, lasting a month or two. Pinky here is one of my favorites, and he's the only casualty of the V&V resin. With this snap javelin there, kind of partially broke off once. I glued it back, and it just snapped off. So I'm calling this a dart for now, but I've been meaning to go back, drill out the hand, and put it in the shaft. So what you see here has been basically about 4 years in the making, which is pretty slow, but it's pretty typical for me. So the paint method here was base coating nice bright colors, using the airbrush to do some nadiral shading from below, and then go back and manually do some highlights. These Levy javelin models were the very first ones that I did, and I really stuck to the same few colors: off-white, red, blue, and green. After the first 12, I decided I need some more variation than that, and went on to a light blue, light green, a pink. For the light green, I did use a light green straight from the bottle, but the blue and the red were made from mixing that off-white color, pale skin from Scale Color in this case. And that is what I would do for the highlight colors as well, just mix in that pale skin color. So there's a variety of tones here, but I feel like they're all on the same kind of wavelength. The trim would be done during the base coat stage. You can see it gets covered up with the airbrush shading, just like the main cloth colors. Doing the trim would take a lot of time, to be honest. You had to keep the line the same consistency, and there was a ton of trial and error finding the right colors to go with the right base cloth color. There's a lot of painting over the lines if I thought didn't quite look right. So if you want to do something like this, pay attention to these individual trim schemes and try to replicate those. A lot of the time, just a contrasting color along with white or yellow works pretty good. And you can add in some micro textures with dots or triangles or zigzags, stuff like that. Now we're digging into the Gripping Beast Metal Yams Vikings. These are some classic models. They have to be like their #1 selling army box. And one of the reasons for doing this army in the first place. So much character with these models. Apart from a shield swap or two, these are the models straight out of the box, essentially. Unlike the Levy, where I was adding some random shields and random plastic weapons, just cause more than anything. So I did these in 2 batches. One was immediately after doing the Levy, and then the second one was probably the 4th or the 5th batch. And once I got there, I was pretty comfortable with the colors and pushing for a wider variety. This guy here always reminds me of the Geico caveman. You've seen those commercials in the US? I'll always save him for last as a casualty on account of his Neanderthal heritage. On the shields here, you can see I ended up doing freehand on pretty much all of them except for the weird square ones with a lot of texture. Given the variety of manufacturers I was using, just trying to get decals for all that would have been a pretty big nightmare, and probably would still end up with some freehand on some that didn't fit, and I don't know, just having a mix of decals and freehand seems no bueno for me. The Levies just got plain shields, but everybody else from Warriors on up got a variation of this Raven design. Ended up using triangles instead of the curved beak and head, as I found getting the proportion and look on that particular aspect a little tricky. And just doing the triangles here, you get the idea, and it goes a lot quicker. As you're looking at these, you'll see that no two are quite the same, and it just uses the same method as the trim, where I base coat the shield, paint the design, airbrush the shading, and then do a highlight or two on the actual design itself. For consistency on the shields, you'll see they're either black, red, or that off-white, with the design being black, red, yellow, off-white. So in addition to the Gripping Beast Metal Warriors, we've got the Brother Vinni Maidens. These are awesome models. Really love these. I didn't show you all the Gripping Beast Metal Warriors, but we are going to take a look at all of these Brother Vinnies. There's 8 in total, 4 with axes, 4 with spears, compared to 16 of the Metal Gripping Beast Warriors. So I've got 24 of these warriors to go with those 24 Levy with javelins. These ones have their shields molded to their arm mostly, so I had to get a little creative trying to turn their unique shields into something resembling a raven. These are resin models, but the shafts on the weapons are a little thicker, I would say, than V&V, and probably a little more durable. No issues with durability on these. Moving on to the archers. These are a mix of Gripping Beast plastic archers with V&V miniatures, resin heads, some V&V Viking archers, and some Brother Vinni's arrow wives. This blue guy here was featured in the Nadiral shading video. If you want to paint models like this, go back and take a look at that video. So there's a total of 16 of these. It's kind of an unusual number. In Saga, you need 12 models for a unit of Levy usually. But these were built with the pagan peoples in mind, and they can take archer warriors. And there's actually a decent play for using a unit of 11 archer warriors and 5 archer warriors. I do have some more Gripping Beast archers and Victrix archers actually unassembled. So I could theoretically shoot for 24 archers at some point, but I can't see myself using 2 units of bow levy in any faction that I would use these models for. Any ideas there? Always gotta have a pinky, of course. And these Brother Vinny Arrowwives, ooh, these are some lovely models. This gal here is probably my favorite painted figure in the entire army. Right, that's it for the lower class citizens of the Heathen army. Definitely the bulk of the force. We'll move on to the Hearth Guard and Hero portion of our program. We're going to jump back to the Gripping Beast Yams Viking box. These are Hearth Guard models with chainmail and other assorted bits of armor. Again, a lot of character in these classic models. A couple of these I did swap out the weapons for plastic swords or axes. Just thought they looked better than the metal ones provided. There's 5 with a hand weapon shield, and then 3 of them I ended up converting into heavy weapon Dane Axe boys. This dude right here is a badass. We'll say this guy here is a little, little derpy with his Gumby arms. Wasn't sure that I was gonna paint him, but ended up polishing the turd and mixing them in with his buddies. So with more metal on these guys, less opportunity for colorful clothes, I ended up giving many of them a nice brightly colored helmet, and even some of their armor is colored. In addition to these boys, I picked up the Gripping Beast Varangian Guard, the hand weapon shield version. Guys have a nice Eastern aesthetic that I thought mixed in well with the original set of Hearthguard. Gripping Beast also has another version of the Varangian Guard in these style with heavy weapons, and I definitely want to pick those guys up. And time to show off the last member of that Yams Viking Warband set, and that is the Warlord. This dude is a slab of meat. Nice model. Very tall. Comparison to one of his Hearthguard brethren. Don't actually use him as a Warlord, though. He's an extra hero model, personal champion, new food, old feud, challenger. This bigger base, we can talk about the basing a little bit. It's pretty simple. Get some sand on there, add a few tiny rocks, paint the sand brown, dry brush with kind of a leather color, paint the rocks gray, give them a wash, dry brush them with kind of cream or ivory color. Give it a pretty light dusting of a green flock in certain areas. Then I have a mix of light green, dark green, mid-green, spongy bits all mixed up, and then round it out with 2, 3, or 4 different kinds of static grass clumps. Gives it a nice chaotic look. If you're playing Vikings, you gotta have some Berserkers. These first 2 are V&V Miniatures Ulfhednar. So much skin showing. Put a little extra effort into the pants, make them colorful. The other 2 come from Brother Vinny's Berserker set. Really like this one with the spear. Very dynamic pose. Spare gal here, she's a little cheesy with the club. Really wanted to swap that out for a big axe, but just the way the model was built and the diameter of the club, I thought I'd end up wrecking it. Pretty fantastical model. Works well to represent a berserker, which be more mythological than historical anyways. Moving on to some more believable female historical models. We got these bad Squiddo cavalry riders here. These were built to be mounted Hearthguard for a Germanic peoples variant of the warband. They've had their weapons swapped out for plastic bits, put on a plastic horse with a plastic shield, all Gripping Beast stuff. The horses they came with weren't bad, but I just wanted them to match with the other chaps in the unit. The guys are either the Goth noble or heavy Roman cavalry with the chainmail and Victrix heads. They're pretty generic, but they get the job done. Built this guy up to be a personal champion. Actually, a gripping beast mounted Jarl. So they have one or two mounted Vikings. A sucker for any model holding its helmet, as we shall see. For the Warlord, I'm using Bad Squiddo. Warlord Lagertha here, mounted. A plastic axe, plastic shield, mounted on the Fire Forge. I think it's Richard the Lionheart horse. It's a badass horse, as you can see. A metal horse she came with. Once again, I thought they were pretty good, but just lacking in size. Turned out pretty good. I actually wish I would have given her a red shield after the fact here. I think that might have looked a little better. Maybe someday I'll go back and do that. I'm a little anal retentive, so I wouldn't put it past me. Now, I actually use a foot version of Lagertha way more. This is my typical Warlord model. It's not Bad Squiddo. It is actually a Warhansa model. The blade on the sword it came with was a little janky. It may have been attached to her face. Can't quite remember. But I swapped it out for an old Warhammer sword. It's a pretty big model, so that scale fit right in. And you can see on her shield, I actually did go back and give her the true Raven's head instead of the triangles. And this is a resin model, by the way. So the most recent thing I've built for the Heathens is this wagon here. The wagon itself is scratch built from Bossa with some plastic wheels that I had on hand. The wheels, I think, are like circus wheels from Train Carnival set or something like that. You can find quite a few, Hussite wagons online, but they don't really look particularly badass or anything. It's hard to make a badass looking wagon, so I just did something basic and added some metal, I think, foundry shields that I had. I glued on there to help tie it in with the rest of the horse. And you can see for the crewman here, I'm just using some of the javelin levy. It's armed with improvised projectiles, so I think that fits. Other than that, just a few odds and ends to go through. Love this bald bastard here. This is an Anglo-Dane warlord from Gripping Beast metal model. Got it as a gift from a buddy. It was very lightly painted in the blue and yellow to begin with, and I just painted over everything to end up with the result before you. He's a shorty, but he's filled with plenty of fury. I'll use him as the brute in Old Feud or New Feud. And people tell me I can use these figures as Anglo-Danes without too much fuss, so at some point he might see work as a warlord there. Got a Gripping Beast Bard. Ended up replacing the janky head and hand with plastic versions. Meaning to use this guy in a battle report as an additional challenge for myself, but I haven't quite gotten around to it. My objectives, these are actually holdovers from my first warband, the Men of Wessex. These are Gripping Beast, Angry Monks. Hopefully they've replaced the molds since I purchased these about 8 years ago, but they were pretty atrocious at the time. Very soft, terrible detail. Managed to polish these up. These work as moving or static objectives. The last thing I keep here in the Heathen's box is the Saga Thursday mascot. This is a wildling from Dark Sword Miniatures, but pretty low fantasy with realistic proportions and a cool pose and a cool shield. So he was the first warlord for the Men of Wessex. When I sold that warband, I actually kept this guy and painted a replacement version along with a blonde version that I gave away in a charity raffle. And who knows, maybe I'll pick up a few more give away at some future raffle or something like that. So that's it for now. Looking forward, I don't think we're done with the Heathens by any stretch. I actually don't have enough warriors. I only have 3 points of no special equipment warriors. I want to add 16 more warriors to get to 5 points of warriors available for building armies. Plan for that right now is a mix of Medberry Miniatures, Vendel Age, Vikings, and some War Games Atlantic. Their Shield Maidens. I'm going to paint up a couple of those. Want those metal gripping beasts, Ferengi, and guard models I mentioned. And I'll have to do one more armored guy somehow because I have 3 currently, so I need to get to 8. I want to do 4 to 8 more of the mounted armored horsemen. I've got 4 mounted Vendels coming from Medberry for his Kickstarter, and more bad Squiddos in shame pile. A big question might be heavy weapon warriors. Not sure how often I would use those. You could see Yams Vikings, Lithuanians, maybe Norsgales. So I might just pass on that. For mercenaries, I do have more of Brother Vinny's, some Sword Maidens with Valkyrie and a Banner Bearer, so I could do that unit. Other than that, I don't really foresee any other mercenaries being painted specifically to match these guys. So the end is in sight, but probably going to be another 2 or 3 years. So maybe I'll come back around and show that stuff off in 2027. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions or comments about anything you've seen, go ahead, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. Otherwise, as always, best of luck in all your battles, be they on or off tabletop. See you guys.
Saga!
If you'd like to see more Saga content, consider joining the Heathen Army over on Patreon or popping on down to the Saga Thursday Discord server. Links below. Thanks, guys.